Right now, the world dislikes Israel more than it ever has. And by the measures a government actually tracks, money, weapons, allies, Israel has never had it better. But still, in the most recent global survey, 2 out of 3 people across 36 countries say they view Israel unfavorably, some of its oldest friends included. In that same window, the United States sent Israel billions of dollars in military aid. Without a single interruption, not one ally walked away. Not one weapons shipment got canceled. So which one is the real story? The collapse in reputation, or the alliance that didn't even flinch? To understand what is actually happening, we have to go back to how this alliance was actually built in the first place. For most of its history, Israel's survival strategy was simple: win the wars, then out-diplomat everyone after. Peace with Egypt in 1979, peace with Jordan in 1994. Then, in 2020, something genuinely new: the Abraham Accords. Israel normalized relations with the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco without solving the Palestinian question first. Here's the analogy to understand this situation better. Imagine 2 neighbors who feuded for decades. Instead of finally resolving the fence dispute, they just start doing business together anyway, because they both hate the guy 3 houses down more. That guy 3 houses down was Iran. It worked. Trade with the UAE alone went from next to nothing to billions of dollars a year. And by late 2023, there were quiet signals that even Saudi Arabia, the biggest prize of all, was inching toward the table. Then, October 7th happened. Hamas killed around 1,200 people in southern Israel and took roughly 250 hostages. Israel's response over the next 2 years would kill more than 70,000 Palestinians in Gaza, according to Gaza's health ministry. A figure Israel disputes as inflated, partly because it doesn't separate fighters from civilians. We'll come back to that dispute because it matters. But here's where it gets complicated. Because Gaza isn't actually the reason global opinion cratered this year. In February 2026, Israel and the United States did something they'd only rehearsed once before. They launched a full war on Iran. Not a strike, a war. Israeli jets killed Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, in the opening hours. Iran fired back. Missiles hit Gulf states, a school, and a residential neighborhood in Israel, killing 9 civilians. The Strait of Hormuz, the passage that something like 1/5 of the world's oil moves through, got partially blocked. Global oil markets convulsed. This was the second Israel-Iran war in less than a year. There'd already been a 12-day war in June 2025, and it's genuinely the detail that should surprise you. Most Western audiences remember Gaza. Far fewer remember that Israel and Iran fought 2 wars in 18 months, one of which pulled the U.S. military into direct, sustained combat. Why does that matter for our question? Because Pew's most negative ever numbers on Israel were collected during this war, February through May 2026. Aid groups in Gaza even noted that global media attention shifted away from Palestinian suffering toward Iran, even as conditions in Gaza stayed just as dire. So what looks like the world turning on Israel over Gaza is really 2 crises stacked on top of each other, both testing the same relationships at the same time. And the numbers that came out of that stacking are genuinely historic. 3 data points, and I want you to sit with each one because they're not the same kind of shift. 1. Global public opinion. Pew's spring 2026 survey of 36 countries found a median of 67% unfavorable toward Israel, just 25% favorable. Confidence in Netanyahu personally is even worse. Most countries surveyed said they have little or no trust in him to do the right thing. This isn't just the usual suspects either. Unfavorable views rose in the US, the UK, Germany, Poland, South Korea. Allied democracies, not adversaries. 2. American sympathy, the one number every strategist watches. In February 2026, Gallup found that for the first time since it started asking in 2001, More Americans said they sympathized more with Palestinians than with Israelis. Not by much, 41 to 36. But the direction is what matters. A year earlier, Israel led by 13 points. 3 years ago, before October 7th, Israel led by 23 points. 3. The United Nations. In September 2025, the General Assembly voted 142 to 10 to endorse a plan reviving the two-state solution. Israel and the U.S. were among the 10 no votes, alongside Argentina, Hungary, and a handful of Pacific Island nations. That's about as isolated as a no bloc gets at the UN. Here's a genuinely hard-to-dispute number underneath all of this. The United States has given Israel at least $21.7 billion in military aid since October 7th, according to a joint report from Brown University's Costs of War Project and the Quincy Institute. A figure that doesn't even count tens of billions more in arms sales still to be delivered. Hold that number, because it's about to become the whole counter-argument. Here's the twist that separates a lazy take from an honest one. Soft power collapsed. Hard power didn't. 3 things that tell the opposite story. First, the money never stopped. $21.7 billion isn't a trickle from a wavering ally. It's nearly 3 times what Israel got in an average year under its previous 10-year aid deal with Washington. Whatever American voters feel, the American state kept the weapons flowing without interruption. Second, the Gulf states didn't walk away. Kazakhstan actually joined the Abraham Accords in late 2025, the first Central Asian country to do so. Saudi Arabia still hasn't signed, and it's clear about why. It wants real progress on Palestinian statehood first, but hasn't signed yet is a very different sentence than walked away. A Carnegie Endowment analysis put it plainly. The Accords have largely survived the war intact. Third, the UN vote wasn't unanimous outrage. It was 142 votes, still short of a wall. 10 countries, including the world's most powerful military, voted no. 12 abstained. That's overwhelming. But it's not universal, and it's certainly not the global South versus everyone. Here's the analogy for what's actually happening. Think of Israel's global standing as a house. The public opinion is the paint job, and right now it's peeling badly, in full view of the street. But the foundation, the treaties, the military alliance, the aid pipeline, hasn't moved an inch. A house with bad paint and a solid foundation is a very different problem than a house that's structurally collapsing. Which raises the real question. If the foundation's fine, why does the paint job matter at all? 3 forces are driving this shift, and they're bigger than any one war. 1. The visuals changed the argument. Gaza is one of the most documented wars in history, filmed constantly from the ground by the people living through it. You cannot out-argue a smartphone video. Whatever the strategic justification, the images did their own persuading. 2. The legal frame shifted. In December 2023, South Africa filed a genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice, the same court using the same 1948 Genocide Convention that once held Serbia accountable for Srebrenica. That's the surprising primary source worth knowing. This isn't a fringe accusation. It's a formal case at the world's highest court, built on the treaty every UN member has signed. Now, important nuance most coverage skips. That case is still years from a verdict. Israel only filed its counter-arguments in March 2026, and experts don't expect a final ruling on the actual merits until 2027 or 2028 at the earliest. The case has shaped the conversation about Israel enormously. It has not yet reached a verdict. 3. The generational divide is the widest of all. In the U.S., 74% of adults under 35 view Israel unfavorably, versus 49% of those over 50. That's not a blip. That's a preview of where American policy drifts over the next 20 years, as today's 20-somethings become tomorrow's senators. Here's the uncomfortable part for both sides of this argument. Israel says it's fighting a defensive war against groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran's proxies, that are explicitly committed to its destruction, and it points to October 7th as proof the threat is real, not theoretical. Critics say a response that's killed tens of thousands of civilians and drawn a genocide case at the world's top court can't just be waved away as self-defense. Both of those things can be true at once. That tension, legitimate security fear colliding with an international backlash over how that fear gets acted on, is the actual story. Not Israel bad or Israel right. That collision. So, is the world turning against Israel? The honest answer, the public is. The states mostly aren't. Yet. That gap between what governments do and what their own citizens now believe is one of the most interesting fault lines in geopolitics today, and it's not unique to Israel. It's the same gap you'll find in how democracies handle Russia, China, immigration, half a dozen other issues where public sentiment and state strategy have quietly stopped agreeing with each other. Here's what to actually watch over the next 6 months. Does Saudi Arabia sign the Abraham Accords? Because if the country that's held out the longest for the clearest reasons finally signs, that tells you the foundation really is as solid as the aid numbers suggest. If Riyadh keeps waiting, that tells you something the paint job has been trying to warn us about all along. And there's a pattern worth remembering here because it's happened before. In 1956, after the Suez Crisis, world opinion turned sharply against Israel, Britain, and France almost overnight. Within a decade, most of those alliances had quietly reset.